into RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
Greetings to everyone listening to the RBLR Sports Podcast. This is James Knowles coming to you for the RBLR Rowdies beat, and I am here this week not with my usual co-host Leo, but I am here with Eureka. Eureka, I always ask, how are people doing? How are you doing this week after New Year's Eve?
Happy New Year! It's a wonderful time, and it's been really nice here in Leo after my little playoff run there. But here I am again to talk with a really cool guest that I'm so happy I got to meet this year.
Yes, that is right. We have yet another interview coming up for this evening, and I'm very excited for it because this is something that I've actually been wanting to look into more. But now I have somebody who has even more information than I could probably find just perusing the internet. But last week, I do want to say we had Ryan Davis on. He is one of the hosts for the Rowdies games when they are on TV. So if you have not heard that, please go back and check it out. It was a very good interview. I loved it. And as always, we ask if you could please follow RBLR Sports on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook. You can like and subscribe to our podcast on all major podcast platforms, of course. And now we can get into our interview with Mike Pendleton. Mike, hello. How are you doing tonight?
I'm great. I'm really happy to be here with both of you.
Well, yeah, like I said, I am very happy to have you on because this is a lot of stuff that I've been trying to get more information on, and you are a good guy to get that information. So what I am going to be asking everyone about asking you about for everyone listening is most specifically Detroit City FC, and they're joining the USL Championship. Of course, I do want to get, more information than just that, like your background in soccer and with the Rowdies and fandom and all that. But yeah, that was the big topic here. So we're going to get to that in a little bit. But first, I do want to know, Mike, if you could give us, your general background in soccer and how you got into the Rowdies fandom and such.
Yeah. Well, so my experience in soccer doesn't go back super far. Like I think I played in like first and second grade, and then I didn't really progress from that point forward. So I wasn't going anywhere in that career, but I did get really into sports. So sports have always been a big part of my life. In 2010, when the World Cup, the South Africa World Cup was played, I got really dialed into that one. I was kind of hooked into it, and then passively kind of watched soccer. I think a lot of us, like in the U.S., maybe not both of you, but I think a lot of us in the U.S. are kind of late to life in soccer. So I got into the 2010 World Cup, then kind of passively watched soccer, maybe Premier League games here and there, but didn't get super into it. 2014 Men's World Cup rolls around, and I was totally kind of hooked in to that one. And then from that point forward, when it ended, I was like, I need more of this, like I've got to get more of this. And I don't know if I've ever really admitted this to like other Rowdies people before, but admittedly in 2014, after that World Cup, I'm looking for oh, maybe there's like local soccer for me to go watch. Are the Mutiny still around? And so Googled them, I Googled the Mutiny, who have been gone for a very long time at that point. And stumbled on the Rowdies that way. And so that's when I really started. We started going in 2014, right after that World Cup. I think the 4th of July game might have been like the first game that we went to that year against the Strikers. And we were hooked. We were hooked from that point forward. And have been to, I haven't missed many games, I think, from 2014 onward.
Gotcha. And to complete your introduction, you now work as a volunteer, I suppose it would be, with the Ralph's Mob organization for the actual supporters group.
Yeah. So there's for the mob itself, anybody who wants to be part of the mob can be part of the mob, right? Like just show up in the section. But we do have a board that helps to kind of run the operations of the mob, whether it's coordinating activities or merchandise or things like that. That's what coordinating some of the charitable events that we do. That's what the board's really there for, and to be good caretakers with with the name and with the funds and things like that. So yeah, I am part of that board and have been on that board. I think since like 2016, maybe 2017. I think since 2016.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that is all very cool. And, I, as someone who, was kind of similar to that, it was, it was the 2006 World Cup that I really got into soccer as someone who played it as a kid, but never really watched it. And then, I started wanting to do, the exact same thing that you said was, get more involved in local soccer. And that's how I have recently been trying to get myself to get, exactly that, more involved in doing this podcast in the end. But what I wanted to get into tonight specifically, and we'll talk more about the Rowdies as well. They are what this podcast is based around. But there is a topic that you have some expertise on here, because Detroit City FC has recently joined the USL Championship from NISA, another league in the American soccer pyramid. And I really wanted to delve into the background of Detroit City, their ownership group, and how all of that works. So if you could explain what their infrastructure is, and then how you got involved with that. And that would be really cool for not just the listeners, but myself and Eureka as well.
Yeah. So Detroit City FC is kind of a cool, it's a cool case study. It's a cool example. It's a cool, it's a shining light, I guess, in the U.S. soccer landscape, because there's not really a lot of examples of teams like them for a whole bunch of reasons. So it's not a brand new team, and they weren't a brand new team when they joined NISA either. So this is a team that's been together, I think since 2012, and had been playing in the lower divisions of American soccer, specifically NPSL, which is, it's a national amateur league that has conferences regionally all throughout there are even some down here in Florida. Kind of a competitor, I guess, to USL League 2, if you want to compare the two. Okay. And you have a really wide range of teams that are in that, right? Some teams that are pub teams. It's a bunch of guys on Sunday that want to play and but have a higher level. Maybe they played college, or they want a higher level of competition. So you've got some teams that are like that. Then you've got some teams that are kind of the top of maybe an academy, so maybe they've got a youth program, and then on top they've got a men's side that might be mostly college players who are playing in their off season. And then you also have some teams that are kind of semi-professional, not necessarily that they pay their players, but that they have like a commercial experience. We sell tickets, you can buy merchandise, you can go attend. And since 2012, Detroit City FC has been playing had been playing in NPSL. That's where they started playing in, I think, the Great Lakes region, Michigan, mostly Michigan area, for NPSL. And so they're an amateur team, and they were started by five local guys there, that I think this is where like somebody from Detroit might get this a little bit crisper than I would get it, but I think had been involved in some local leagues around there, and then decided to create this a men's first team, and thought maybe people might go to the games, and so they started this team, and they've been kind of humming around in the amateur ranks, but drawing a bunch of people. Like, I mean, Al Ling, so we typically, because I'm an super attendance nerd, anybody who follows me on Twitter knows I post the USL attendance every week. They're in the amateur, they're in an amateur league, but then they're drawing 3,000, then 4,000, then 5. They kind of hovered around 5,000 to 6,000 fans per game for the last, 6 or so years, which is really comparable to like us.
Yeah.
So they're kind of bigger than the place that they've been in. So these 5 guys, eventually they knew they wanted to take the team professional and needed some investors to be able to do that. In the U.S., you have to have an investor, worth $10 million to be part of your ownership group. So we're able to acquire that. So their ownership kind of evolved that way so that they could get into the professional ranks, and have played in a couple of professional leagues before getting to us. But one of the really unique things about their ownership is they also decided to sell shares in the team that anybody could buy. And the shares were priced at $125 a share. They did this a couple years ago. I want to say it was 2019 or so when they offered it. And they've got such a rabid fan base, with 5,000, 6,000 people going to each game. And people who are admirers like myself from afar. I was born in Michigan, so I kind of admired them from afar that wanted to be involved. So they sold this, and I think in the first bunch of days, they had over 2,000 new shareholders and had cleared over $1 million worth of shares that they sold in the first 5 days or so of opening it up. And it's a pretty unique thing. I think only Chattanooga FC and maybe San Francisco FC, who are both also were amateur teams, had done this before Detroit, but Detroit did it on a little bit of a bigger scale. But raised, over $1 million, and now you've got all these owners all over the place. And it's not uncommon in Europe. There are a lot of teams that are traded, even publicly traded over in Europe, but it is a really rare thing here in the U.S.
Gotcha. And I think Eureka had a question here following up on what we were just talking about. Yeah,
the supporters, a big part of how Detroit City has risen to now the USL Championship. If they come down here to Ao Lang, what do you expect them to travel like as we start to see some another Louisville City type traveling band here?
Yeah. I think that's one of the really cool things is, USL's gone from a place where you had a lot of the MLS2 teams that didn't have any fans or anything like that. And now there's bigger fan bases that are growing up. And then teams like Detroit that are kind of like-minded in that you have supporters who are really heavily engaged. For them, I expect them to travel, even though Detroit's, 2,000 miles away from here? Yeah. They do travel to away games. When they joined NISA and were starting to play on a more national stage, they were sending people out to California or Florida. Not unlike, I think, James, you went to Vegas. Didn't you go to the Vegas Rowdies game?
That's right. Yes, I did.
So we had a pretty good group who went to Vegas. So not unlike us, they have people who like to travel and are really passionate about the team. And so I think we'll definitely see folks here. The Louisville circumstance was maybe a little bit unique because it was such a big game, sure. But I definitely think they'll have traveling fans for sure. They'll be traveling to Pittsburgh, Indy, Louisville for them, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a good chunk of them want to travel down here.
Now, one thing I did want to bring up, we talked about ownership and that unique situation. Detroit City's ownership and fans have definitely always kind of had a hand in decision making, up until maybe them joining the USL Championship. What do you see, even if it was from afar? Like, what do you see? Maybe some of the criticism and maybe some of the back and forth talking as they joined the USL Championship.
Yeah, I wondered about that. I mean, because it's twofold, right? They have fans that are owners, right? And you want to be able to have your say. The other thing is the politics of soccer in the United States is an interesting animal. And I could go into like the soccer wars, and we could have a whole podcast on soccer wars itself.
Oh, yeah.
But there definitely were on the side of, if you think of, USL and MLS as maybe more corporate soccer. And then you have this group of people that were a group of teams that are more independent, want to control more of their own destiny or want to control more of the league's destiny. In the USL, we don't own part of the USL. The Rowdies don't own part of the USL. But in NASL, that the Rowdies used to be in, and in NISA, that you'd own part of, not a lot, but you own a part of it. And so there is kind of there's a political or I can't think of the right word right now. It's on the tip of my tongue and I'll think of it. But there's definitely a different viewpoint. So I kind of was curious too on how people would respond when they came over. But their fans were overwhelmingly supportive. Now I think people who are on the side of the what they would other NISA teams and things like that probably weren't so pumped. The NISA itself, the league issued a pretty scathing release when Detroit came over. But for Detroit City fans, they seem to, I think, maybe a little bit of anxiousness. Even I remember when we came over from NASL, I didn't know what to expect. So I had a little bit of anxiousness about coming into this. Were things going to change for us? I think there's a little bit of feeling like that. But for them, I think they probably see this as the most viable place to be able to exist. Because even just existing in lower division soccer in the U.S. is never guaranteed. So I think they look at USL as something that, it is a safe landing spot for them. And so that I think is a little bit of reassuring. I think the other thing is it is to some extent probably exciting for them to be going from, hey, we started as an amateur team and then we went into professional soccer at the third division level, did really well there. And now we're promoting into the second division, even though they're buying their way into it. But I think there's probably something that's exciting there. And they've always been kind of the big dog. Now, I mean, recently they've won everything. Like in NISA, they won pretty much everything that you could win. But it wasn't always like that in MPSL, but there were no teams drawing 5,000 or 6,000, so they're going into teams that have nobody.
Yeah.
So I think coming into a situation where, hey, there's going to be other teams, there's other big fan bases here, there's higher level of competition. I think they're probably pretty excited about that as well. So I didn't see as much bad. And one other thing that I'd add here, because I know I'm a little ranty.
No, you're
but
good.
One other thing that I think I'd add that I think they did really well. They own their own clubhouse in Detroit, and it's an indoor facility where they can run some of their youth programs. There's a bar there. And I think they pulled together, the ownership group pulled people together before the USL, it would have been being leaked and things like that. But before they even made the announcement, they brought people in to be able to talk with them. So the fans didn't necessarily get a vote in whether or not they went or not. Okay. But they were the first people that got communicated to. And I know even myself as a shareholder, I got something in my email before, it had gone out to, the rest of the world. We want to, and everybody was in, if you couldn't be there in person, you could join virtually. So you could get the news from them instead of hearing it, by a press release or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they decided to, self-promote themselves to a maybe a bigger league. If only we'd have other promotion in soccer. But I'll hand it back over to you,
James. One day.
So yeah, that actually leads me into another question that I had here. You mentioned that the shareholders didn't necessarily get a vote on this. That was something that was up to the ownership group, but. Is it possible for you to expand upon what not necessarily the benefits, but maybe all the aspects are of being a shareholder and, what that entails for you as someone who, gets the privileges and, if you're not voting on things necessarily, what things you do have a say on?
Yeah, this will be really bad on my part, but I haven't attended any of the shareholder meetings that I should have attended.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they do that. So they pull people together for shareholder meetings where they'll either weigh in with folks about things that are happening in the club, or you might hear things that are happening earlier. I think if I was a local to Detroit, I think there's probably, I'm not exactly 100% on this, but I think there's discounts within their clubhouse or on season tickets or things like that, stuff that I wouldn't really be able to partake in. And at the time, there were different packages. They had gone through WeFunder, so certain packages or certain amounts of shares that you bought, gave you different benefits. I think one of them even went up to season tickets for life, and I can't remember what the buy-in was for something like that. But there were different buy-in levels, and I just went with a couple of shares myself, which I think I got a commemorative scarf and I got a commemorative piece of art. As part of it, and then the benefits, and like I said, I could attend the shareholder meetings. Again, it's it's not like me and 12 other people; it's like me and 2,000 other people. But I think that's a pretty cool aspect, so that you can continually have audience with the ownership of the club, I think is a really cool thing. And that's the kind of thing I'd love to see the Rowdies. You don't even need to have ownership to be able to do things like that.
Right.
But I think it's a really cool thing to be able to have the ear of owners, of the owners of the club, and know where things are happening before anybody else kind of knows where things are going.
Yeah, I think what you said was they're having the ear of the ownership. I think that that's very important as someone who has seen, so many debacles over this past year in the soccer world. I'm not the only one, obviously, who probably saw all those European teams try to create their own club competition and then get incredibly mad that they think that they could just, separate themselves. But, that kind of comes with an ownership group being totally detached from everybody else. So I think that that's really awesome that Detroit City has that involvement. And to that end, there is also another pretty famous shareholder among Rowdies fans. Could you possibly tell me about Evan Loro's involvement, if you have any more information?
Yeah, so Evan Loro is also a shareholder, and because he's a Michigan guy. He went to the University of Michigan, and when he went over to the Red Bull, he went over to the Red Bull system, and then I think he went on loan. He actually played for Detroit City and helped them win. I think he might have only played one game. Again, the Detroit people correct me on this. I think he only played one game, but he helped them win a title, whether it was a conference title or something along those lines. He had come in, so he's got a little bit of like a cult status, I think, because he helped them win a really big game. But when the shares were open, he went in on that. And a bunch of local. Iggy Pop is another Detroit City FC. I don't know how many shares Iggy Pop. Iggy Pop was
awesome.
Probably on a different program than I was on. But yeah, it was really cool. A lot, I think, local people, local names to Detroit bought in, which was really awesome. And one other thing I'd add there too, that I just recently saw this. One of the benefits of owning shares is you own something that is of value, and there's not necessarily a way to trade the shares. Like, you can't go on the New York Stock Exchange and trade your Detroit City shares. But one of the things that I read is that the shares actually appreciated in value when they came to USL Championship, because your shares are a portion of all of the shares in total are 10% of the valuation of the team. The valuation of the team went up, so their shares have appreciated. And I don't know that there's a way to trade them publicly at this point. But it's cool to know that, the investment that you had has some level of equity, and that level of equity, rose, or that valuation rose.
Gotcha. I did not realize that all of that went into it, and the fact that Iggy Pop is part of the shareholder, that's pretty cool for me as a fan. But you had mentioned Evan Loro, him playing for them. I think Eureka had a question specifically about what the roster and all that might be. Eureka, what did you have to look into there?
Yeah, it was nice, Laurel coming in to making his semi-pro debut in the Open Cup. If my research is correct here, was that one game. It even went to penalties, and he made a couple saves there. But kind of
That's awesome.
thinking along those same lines. I know you're an avid fan of USL Championship. Maybe looking at Detroit City, bringing their players into this different league. Are there USL Championship players they might want to look to upgrade from day one in this new league?
Yeah, I think, and I've listened to a couple of their podcasts, and it's hard because there's not like a lot of crossover between NISA and USL, right? And we don't play each other, and we haven't had the Open Cup in a couple of years, so you don't really get to see where all these guys stack up. When I look at their roster, the best example probably would be Oakland last year, who came from NISA and then went into USL Championship. They really struggled out of the gate in USL Champion, and they had signed USL veterans to add to their squad, but it is a different level of competition. They had some other factors going against them. They had to play a ton of games on the road, and they had some facility things. But then they ended up sneaking in the playoffs towards the end. I think if I look at Detroit's roster, like for Rowdies fans who are fans going back to the NASL days, there are some names that are familiar names on their roster, like Kevin Venegas, who was a really good player for Minnesota United for many years, and then went on, played for the New York Cosmos. Darwin Espinal, who played for the Rowdies for a couple of years. I think he was like 19 or 20. Everybody loved him. He was kind of like a Juan Tejada kind of player. I mean, he never didn't score as many goals, but people were excited. Young, talented guy. Played a couple seasons. He was last year playing for them. Matt Lewis, who I think also played for the New York Cosmos. They had signed really good talent for Nisa and really wiped the floor with Nisa, over the last couple of years. And they have a coach, Trevor James. I think that they call him TMFJ, and I'll censor out the MF, but Trevor James is their coach who is also like a cult hero for them, who's got some USL experience. I think he might even have some MLS experience from an assistant coaching perspective, but he definitely has USL assistant coaching and coaching pedigree. So he's familiar, I think, with what he's coming into. I think you'll see some guys stay from their roster, but I wouldn't be shocked to see them turn over maybe 50% or more of the roster to try to get. I don't know what their budget's going to look like. That will be interesting. I've heard that they got a new investor even to come into USL because you needed somebody who had 20 million in net worth. So how much they open the pocketbook, I don't know, but I do think they're going to have to, if they want to be competitive in USL, I think they're going to have to add quite a few pieces. But again, I could be surprised because we don't have that crossover play. I watched a handful of Nisa games, mostly their games last year. I do think it's a different pace in USL Championship than maybe what they were playing against in Nisa. So they'll need the parts.
So they're not going to like shoot you an email. Hey, Mike, do you think we should sign Evan Loro? Yes or no? Retweet. Every retweet's a vote.
No, they're not going to do that. They'd be super psyched. I mean, I see some of the fan base knowing that he's not coming back for us. Yeah. I think they'd be super psyched to have him back whenever he's healthy.
Yeah, I think that any team that he ends up landing on, they're going to have themselves quite a stud in net there. But I have a few quick questions more about Detroit, and then we're going to move into a couple of other quick things, including talking more about the Rowdies and Ralph Small. But there is also a team that I believe is taking on this type of model, at least at the, maybe at the basis level, maybe not entirely going for the exact same thing that you guys are, but there is a women's team in Minnesota that is looking into this. Have you seen anything about that? Have you heard anything from the people who are, already involved in being shareholders of a soccer club in America?
Yeah, I know one of the guys, Wes Burdine, who is a Minnesota United fan. He owns a soccer bar up in Minneapolis, or I think it might be in St. Paul. And so I know he's involved in the ownership. They came out of the gates and they were really successful with selling shares. And I was watching how they were doing it. They had everything, I think they had a really good social media campaign set up to be able to help them sell the shares. But they were also set up in places like the Minnesota State Fair and things like that to try to, cast a pretty wide net. I think they sold, and I don't know for sure, but I think they sold over $1 million worth of shares themselves.
Wow. Gotcha.
I could be wrong about that. Maybe that was the valuation, but I know they were really successful and they did more than what they thought. And they'll be playing in the USLW in the USL, which is kind of the comparable to USL League 2. So this amateur semi-pro, I believe next year, which would be really exciting. Detroit City also playing in USLW, and probably I would imagine they'd be in the same division, which would be cool.
Oh, that would be very cool. Well, with this kind of, maybe not expansion of the model, that might be a little early to say, but is this something that you think could possibly take off here? What are your thoughts as someone who is as involved in it as literally being a shareholder yourself?
Yeah, it's something I hope that does. Because what you were saying, James, earlier about like the Super League, not the USL Super League, but the European Super League. I think there's just something about soccer that's really different, or about football that's really different, where people want to feel like it's theirs. And that's up to including literally owning a piece of it. So you don't have things like, we've seen the St. Louis Rams become the LA Rams, or the Oakland Raiders become the Las Vegas Raiders. You don't have things like that because it's yours. And so I'd hope that more people will consider it. I think it's encouraging to see a team that's in the USL side of the equation doing it in USLW. Maybe we'll see a little bit more of that, hopefully, in USL League One and USL Championship, or in USL Super League, the women's Super League, Pro Super League here. I think that would be a really cool thing. I know that it's not easy. For a couple of reasons, I think state by state, when it comes to funding something like this, I think there are different regulations that come into play, because I know a team from Chicago had been looking into it a ways back. And so I know that there are some difficulties state to state. And then the other thing is US soccer does require that minimum investor. So they're an investor at the Division III level, $10 million. I know I mentioned this earlier. At the Division II level, $20 million. At the Division I level, $50 million in net worth, have to be the majority owner. And so if you've got something, one of the roadblocks to this is you've got something that has equity. So if you look at the Rowdies, the Rowdies, maybe they're worth 15, 20 million, if you, based on things that you might read in, some of the sports business journals. So to say they're worth 15 to 20 million, if you have to offer 10% of that, then you're giving away a chunk of your valuation. So that can be maybe a roadblock to things like this. But if you've got a pretty progressive owner that's willing to see the benefits that could be there by a group of people being really rabidly engaged, then I think that there's, I hope that there's a future there for it.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, I would personally say that I agree with that. But my last Detroit related question here is a little bit of a cheeky one, but when these two teams play each other, who are you going to be rooting for out on the field?
Yeah, Mike. Yeah, Mike, who are you rooting for, buddy?
Oh, that's such a tough one. I didn't ever think at the time when I did this that this was going to happen. I mean, the Rowdies have my heart. I probably more than any team, maybe over my whole fan. The only thing that ever came close, and this is like I know this is like RBLR. I know it's all Tampa sports, but I'm a New England native. Like, I grew up with the Red Sox, grandfather's grandfather kind of a thing,
Gotcha.
5 generations of Red Sox fans. That's probably the closest I could get to that, but the Rowdies have surpassed that. It is part of my heart. So without a doubt, I will be, I'll be rooting for the Rowdies, and I'll be hoping that my financial investments do well.
I can understand that too. That would be good. But okay, that's awesome. I think that the Rowdies fans will appreciate that as well. And with all of our Detroit talk out of the way, I think that the next thing that I wanted to ask you about is your background in artwork, and go through what you do with Ralph's Mob and outside of Ralph's Mob. And I think that Eureka had a couple more questions related to that as well once we get there.
Yeah. So I think the cool thing, in my day job, I do some artwork, but it's not like my full day job. And, when I started following the Rowdies, maybe 8 now, it's 8 years ago, this was just a cool place to be able to express myself, So everything from, so there are things that I've designed, I've designed some of the mob scarves and jerseys over the years, to the sports trading card. I did a couple of editions of Rowdies cards, and Rika's done an amazing job designing some for you all as well, Rowdies, which are amazing.
Thank you, sir.
So yeah, soccer became just a really cool place to be able to express myself. Sometimes it's redoing other logos that you see teams drop really bad logos on Twitter. And I often like to redesign the really bad logos so that they don't look so bad. But it just is, I grew up in an artistic family. My mom was an artist. My sister's a tattoo artist. And it's just always been a part of my life. And it was my dream job was to be a Disney animator. So it just is a cool way to be able to express and a cool place to be able to do it. So.
Gotcha. Well, I will turn it over to Eureka for his specific questions here.
Yeah, I guess we're in this vein, so I might as well just talk now. Speaking of sports cards, doing Rowdies cards. If we could get real sports cards, let's just say RBLR and the Ralph's Mob and the Rowdies all get together and say, all right, Mike, we're gonna do some real Rowdies cards. We're gonna give them away at the stadium or whatever. If we did, like, what kind of designs do you think you would want to draw from?
Yeah, the first one I did, and I know you've done some of these too. We can get really nerdy on sports cards as well. But yeah, I mean, the first one I did was 1987 Topps because I'm iconic. Of that age, right? Like I had a ton of those, the wooden borders, and it just was one of my favorite cards ever. So it would be hard not to want to go retro. Everything in the 80s, really mostly kind of the Topps design. The last one that I did is I did the 1975 Topps Rowdies a couple of years ago, and I did it in the style of 1975 Topps. What I really liked, and what was also a pain in the butt, was they had these little figures for each position. So the midfielder had a different kind of like a figure. Yep. And then the goalkeeper, and I had to recreate all those. And that was a kind of a cool too. But if I had to do it, I would definitely want something kind of in that probably mid to late 70s through the probably to 87 kind of Topps design. Somewhere in one of those designs, those classic designs would be really cool.
Yeah, I saw the USL when they named their all league players, like Saba and whatnot. They kind of did like a sports card motif. But they went with like these like geometric 3-dimensional shapes in the background and very like modern pushing, where obviously us drawing from you, to be honest, I mean, I just ripped you off, Mike. I'll tell you straight to your face. I just ripped you off wholesale. Doing the 70s and 80s and even up to some of the 90s styles. So that's what I did wholesale, just ripping you off completely. But I asked you about it. I know I DM'd you. I was like, hey man, what are your thoughts on this?
You did an outstanding job, and you put way more variety. Like, I just did 2 editions, and it was a ton of work just doing the 2 editions. Yeah. You had so much variety. And the thing that I really appreciate, now this is going to be like a fest, but the thing that I really appreciated the most is like the attention to detail to get just the right typeface, just the right colors. It was awesome.
Yeah, well, you did the backs, and we got it offline. We won't take up too much time on this podcast, but you're gonna have to show me how to like really grungy, like give them that like that old school retro, like they really are like 40 years old kind of cardboard look. We're gonna have to trade notes, but outside of that, I guess we'll move on to something a little more serious, and that's the Ralph's Mob and the organized activities that you guys do. Very, very proud. I know walking into Al Lang with the tailgate, you guys doing that toy drive right around the at the playoffs. It was phenomenal. I was so happy that you guys did that, and we were able to could donate some stuff to that. So, I guess my question is, what were you proud of that the Ralph's Mob was able to accomplish this year? Whether that's through Pride Raiser or toy drives or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was. Despite, global pandemic and everything like that, I think we were able to pull off an awful lot this year. I think from an in-stadium perspective, I was really proud. We moved into a new section. We kind of did last year, but, there weren't really a ton of people. So we moved into a new section, moved into a new home in the stadium, and started to kind of figure out and make that ours. That I'm really proud of. I think all of the community stuff I'm super proud of that we do. Jonathan Silva leads up the charity work for Ralph's Mob. We started the year with, and we'll be doing one of these again, but we did a foot golf tournament out on the beaches between us and Skyway Casuals, and raised $2,500 for go gold for childhood pediatric cancer, which
go.
I think is really cool.
Hell yeah.
We had the toy drive, and it was awesome. People at the end of the year helped participate in the toy drive. We had buckets of toys that went to All Children's Hospital. We, like you said, our Pride Raiser, we raised a couple of $1,000s for Metro Inclusive Health here in St. Pete, Tampa Bay area. And even the Lucky prints, for Lucky Mkosana, we did a print that he signed that were hand numbered. And we sold a good chunk of those prints and have raised almost $1,800 for Lucky's BYS Academy and his home in Zimbabwe. So I look throughout the year, even though it was a pandemic year and it was harder to gather and pull people together and things like that, I think we still were able to do some really cool things for the community, and really cool things with each other that I think were awesome.
Phenomenal, man. And if people are, like you said, anyone's able to come to the games and be a part of the mob, but if they did want to take it a little bit further, what's the best way that people can help out, whether that's buying merchandise or what would you like to see people do?
Yeah, I mean, anything. So the number one thing that I want to see people do is show up and be in the section. Okay. Show up and chant. Like, that's the number one thing. That's what we're ultimately there for. But I think, beyond that, yeah, nobody has to be a member to be part of Rouse Mob, but memberships help us to fund things like TIFO and drum repairs, which happen, when you beat on a drum that hard, and smoke and events and things like that. So that's really what the memberships are there for. They're not there for us to track people or make sure people join or anything like that. They're really just how we sell our merchandise to people. If you buy a scarf, you're a member, and it just helps to support the financial aspects of what we do. So that's another thing that people can do. And then getting involved, the Discord, the Rouse Mob Discord is really active. That's where we do a lot of coordinating of things. So just get involved, whether that is, if you're interested in painting TIFO, we have TIFO painting parties. If you're interested in planning events, you can reach out to us there and can get involved that way. That's how people have gotten, connected to us. They just said, hey, I want to do more. And so reaching out, the Discord is absolutely the best place, but seeing any of us on game day, and saying hi, we love to have more people involved because it's a lot of work for sure.
And what about wearing purple? Can I wear purple in the section? Is that
purple is bad? Nobody can wear purple. Yeah, purple is banned. Yeah, I knew banned forever.
I knew that one. James, I'll hand it back over to you, bud.
Well, I had more questions about. Well, actually, I should just say my question to you is, what are your thoughts on this upcoming season for the Rowdies? It's obviously very early days. We've only had a couple of announcements in terms of who's being re-signed and all that. But what do you see? What are you hoping for? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm psyched to see the core people that have been brought back so far. And you could speculate. I know that they teased another wave of people that are coming back, and you can speculate based on the people who we know aren't coming back and the ones that nobody said anything about, that a good chunk of those people could be coming back, like the Sebas, Leos, Forrest, Lassos. You hope that some of those folks that are coming back as well. I'm psyched to run it back again. I think the thing that'll be super challenging, when we went out and weren't able to play the final, I think everybody was hungry. And we're like, we got another run. Picking ourselves up to go do it again. To try to go win the conference again. To go win the best record in the regular season again. To get through 3 rounds of playoffs. Just to get to another final. That's a lot. And so I think Neil, I have so much faith in Neil, but I think that's the real challenge there is how do you make sure that this group of guys is motivated to try to go do it again. You could tell they were hungry last year. And I hope that hunger, knowing these guys, I would imagine that it is. But I think that's the biggest challenge for this season for sure. What's your take on it when you look at the roster so far, or you look at things? Where are you feeling good? Where are you feeling anxious?
Yeah, it's a similar thing, like you said. It's the getting up for the grind of it again after this, getting all the way to the final and not being able to get over that one hurdle. So maybe there are players who at this point are looking and saying, this is my last chance to play in the league above. Maybe there are players who think that there's unfinished business. Maybe there are players who are looking at this like, well, I can't go through that again after 2 seasons where the final was, taken away from us, so to speak, whether it's one way or another. I'm definitely, I want to see the big names on the roster that haven't re-signed. I would like to see them return. And, they can complement the guys who are still there, because there are still several big names, obviously, several important starters. And I hope that, the other thing that I will say, when I see that, X player has left, whoever that is, I am pretty confident that the ownership group for the Rowdies team and the management staff that we have, I think that they can put together a good list of replacements and actually get them working, because they are, they've shown themselves capable of replacing important players in the past 2 years, and even going out and getting players who are important signings brought in, like, this past season was Steven Dos Santos, most of all, I would say. So I think that I'm still confident that they're going to be there or thereabouts. But, are we going to be the elite of the elite? That is going to definitely come down to, which players we get in the second round of announcements here that hopefully will come at the end of this week.
Yeah, Mike, to finish up on that question, I think it's important that they bring back the back three. It's important they bring back El Capitan, Guinzotti. But even if they did that, I do believe they still need another striker. I think there does need to be either someone that starts or shares with Ekra up at the very kind of top mid, to even swapping out when there's a Dos Santos or Guinzotti gets subbed and they can move up into a striker position. Or, as we've seen, injuries happen, and I think we just need a little bit more firepower up front. That would make me feel even more confident. But then again, I mean, we're back-to-back Eastern Conference champions. The team, as it's constructed, does pretty well. The best, most points they've ever had, and at this point, it's just icing on the cake. But we'll see what they bring back with this next wave of signings, and maybe even a new name or two. But who knows? That's to be seen.
Yeah, I feel similar. I think we were having a Twitter conversation, a bunch of us, a little while ago, on strikers, and if you've got Jordan Adebayo-Smith and you've got Lucky and you've got Dos Santos and you bring Seba back, how many more strikers do we need? But we did have that run last year. When Dos Santos was out, we were very different. Yeah. There was no like-for-like replacement for Dos Santos. And so I would love to see, I think you nailed it, I'd love to see somebody else up top and give us another option, another target man, perhaps, that can be a like-for-like with Dos Santos, that can do the hold-up play that we see there. And I do think you're right on the, whether it's the number 10 spot or whatever you want to call it, that attacking midfielder up top. Ekra can kind of do everything, which is awesome. Yep. But I don't think that's his, a creative player there would be really great to see, us find somebody. In so many of the other positions, I think we've got, granted, if guys come back, it feels like we've got good depth there. But those are two places it would be exciting to see somebody.
My last question that I had was about, we don't know what's going to happen with the Race Stadium. However, there has been some talk on Twitter and everything about maybe, how much are the Rowdies and the Rowdies fans having a say, and how vocal we should be in letting them know, what do we want as Rowdies fans, So I wanted to get your perspective on What do you think would be the best situation for the Tampa Bay Rowdies, who are owned by the Rays, if a listener didn't know that? But as the Rays figure out their own home situation, how might it impact the Rowdies, and what do you think would be the best of all scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the next big supporter conversation, or season ticket holder or fan conversation, is how do we make our voice known in this? I may be different than some others, is that I'm open-minded to what the possibilities could look like, but I do think we need to know what they are. My ideal scenario is remodel Al Lang, and it doesn't necessarily need to look like the MLS design that we were going to have, maybe a smaller version of that, but that's, I think, the ideal scenario, is we're playing in a facility that's built for soccer and at home, at our home. Al Lang's become our home. It's the place that people, there was a video the other day of best lower division soccer stadiums across the country, and it's number one, because it's iconic and it's historic, and we have roots here. So that would be my number one preference, is that the Rays get a full-time stadium in Tampa, where I think they probably need to be, and the Rowdies get Al Lang remodeled.
There was a little bit of talk about maybe even sharing a stadium. What are your thoughts on maybe a baseball stadium that converts into a soccer stadium?
Yeah, I mean, it'd have to be a hell of a transformer, right? I mean, we haven't seen that done successfully anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things, I heard Brian Auld, when he was talking to the City Council, say they know that it needs to be able to be built to suit rectangular sports. So I know they know that. And I want to say Rays ownership has been really good to the Rowdies. And I think sometimes we forget it, but, our tickets were 20% more expensive before the Rays came in. When Bill Edwards was the owner, our tickets were really expensive. We had the second most expensive ticket outside of MLS. And that's crazy, So I think the Rays, they lowered prices in concessions, and they lowered prices for tickets. And I think, and look at the winning track record. They've been good owners, but this is one that's important to get right. So far we just haven't seen a baseball stadium that converts to a soccer stadium at the scale of what we want to try to do and be successful doing it. If they've got something that can do that, if there's a rendering or something where there's a plan, I'd love to see it, but I definitely have concerns, it being in a stadium that's way too big. The sight lines or seats not even pointed to where they need to be pointing towards. Infield dirt. Standing supporter section. There's not a heck of a lot of those around. Well, So there's a lot of concerns and a lot of things that are logistically difficult about the two sports sharing. And again, maybe there's an innovative solution, but I do think we need to know that there is one, and that we're not going to be wedged into like a Yankee Stadium type situation with NYCFC and MLS. Right. That's just really a horrible situation. You just don't, I guess my bottom line is, we've got something that's pretty darn good today, and you just don't want it to be worse.
Well, we would
for sure.
We would need to add more seats when Roma comes to play the Rowdies.
True.
So I know Dan is out there somewhere. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up AS Roma Tampa Bay supporters here with the one and only Mike Pendleton here. So
So I think we're a supporters group of like 6, or like 7 or 8.
We can fit in a pizzeria, but we're mighty. All right.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, it's what. So Dan from Unsubs, who I think has been on here. So Dan was, I don't know. I think we were like, after Italy won the Euros, both of us have like Italian roots. I think one day on Twitter, it was like, and Serie A got a new home in CBS, the Italian Soccer League. Serie A got a new home in CBS. And the production is way better than whatever there was before. So we're watching Serie A, like trying to get into Italian soccer, but it's kind of like if you don't have a team, like, it's fun to watch games, but it's way more fun to like have a team. And so I think we were both simultaneously maybe kind of in that same mindset and talking about Italian soccer on Twitter, and just kind of landed on Roma. It's that's where my honeymoon was.
Okay.
This is the story I'm telling.
Okay.
My grandfather was Sicilian and Roman, in Palermo, that plays in Serie C, which is, you know, you're never going to see that on television. So I went Roma, and it just kind of all fit. So we're gaining steam. We've got a handful of us that are watching the games every week,
Yep.
and I think hopefully we'll have a watch party coming up pretty soon here.
Yep.
But yeah, I think we're the largest Serie A supporters group in Tampa Bay.
Oh, 100%. 100%. They're making a trophy for us as we speak. It'll fit just enough Peroni in there.
Yeah. So it's exciting.
Yeah.
It's definitely an exciting thing. It's a really fun league to watch,
Yeah.
and it's been a really fun league this year to watch, for sure. There's some good parity in the league. And Roma's a fun team. There's some exciting players that play for Roma, and it's cool to kind of tap into the Italian heritage.
Yeah, it's been really fun. But James, I've been hogging up all the questions, man. So fire away.
Oh no, actually, I think that is pretty much everything that I had here. We went through, the Detroit City ownership, and also Mike's work with Ralph's Mob. We covered the season that there is to be, and a lot more than that. So I think that I've got everything that I have. If we'll just do our one more thing segment, and then Mike, if you will stick around to just plug your stuff, and then we'll let everybody get out of here. But before that, I just want to say to all of our listeners, if you do have any questions or topics you want us to cover in this off season, please let us know. So far in the off season, all we've done is a 3-episode season recap, because that took longer than I expected, and then a couple of really awesome interviews, including this one today. So the other thing that I will say, please, if you can, check out our shop. We are at shop.rblrsports.com. Liking and subscribing to this podcast is obviously free, but if you do need any new clothes, anything coming up for this year, just something that you are thinking about getting, you can definitely support us by heading over there. Again, that is shop.rblrsports.com. And yeah, you can look at all the new stuff that we've got coming out. Eureka's been working on that set of designs, just like all the cards that you guys were talking about. And yeah, the link will be in the description. So please give us help us out if you enjoy what we are doing here. And I think that should be it. We are going to and also I should say we have a code for 10% off of any orders. Please use that promo code COYR if you would like 10% off anything there, because obviously those discounts do add up. But like I said, thank you everyone for tuning in. It has been yet another really awesome interview. Mike, thank you for helping us out this week and giving us some more information that we can use in the upcoming off season. If you can, please plug anything that you've worked on and where people can find you.
You can find me on Twitter, which I'm on way too often, at Fat7Deuce, PHAT7 Deuce. It was that was the license plate of my 1972 Plymouth Duster, which I bought in high school. So you can find me there. It was 1972, and we called it the Fat 7 Deuce because that's what you did in the 90s. So Ralph's Mob at ralphsmob.com. That's the best way. Hop in the Ralph's Mob Discord. That is where everything happens. So definitely, if you want to get involved in the mob, hit us up on online, on Twitter, on Facebook, but definitely on Discord. And if you're interested in following the best Serie A team that there is to follow, you can find us at AS Roma Tampa Bay on Twitter, and you can become number 7 or number 8.
Yeah, attaboy. Mike, I had to thank you. I know you were giving me the love fest earlier. I'm going to throw it right back at you, big guy. This was a wonderful year for me getting involved, obviously, with RBLR getting off the ground and being able to bring in James and Leo and getting to meet all of the wonderful people of the mob, like Aaron and the unsubs, and but meeting you and getting to shake your hand finally after talking cards and art and soccer and everything. It was a real blast to high five you outside of Al Lang and hang out with you during the playoffs. So and I'm really, really excited. I know we were playing tag a little bit, but we got you on and we had a wonderful conversation. So thank you, Mike.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you both. It was fun to be here.
Good. Glad we could provide that as well. But yeah, thank you. Like I said, and again, thank you to our listeners. We do everything here for you guys, so you have as much information as there can be about the Rowdies, the Rays, the Bucks, and the Lightning. So please follow RBLR Sports. You can do that at RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can find me as well on Twitter. I am at RBLR James K. Eureka. If people want to get to know our producer and the behind the scenes, where could they get at you?
I am at Eureka RBLR.
And always, you can also use the hashtag AskRBLR, and we will get back to you on anything that you ask us there. So the other thing, please like and subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as YouTube and all other major podcast platforms. But that should do it for our guest interview this evening. Please check us out again next week when we will be back, I believe, with another very interesting interview. But in the meantime, and as always, come on, you Rowdies.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.